It's gone 11 o'clock, so my instructions are that we get underway. Hello, everyone. My name is Adnan Nawaz, and I'm here to moderate this panel, which is going to launch the Internet Society's 2017 Global Internet Report, Paths to Our Digital Future, the executive summary of which you have on your seats. Of course, it coincides, the launch of this report, with the 25th anniversary of the Internet Society. My connection to the number 25 is that my journalism career began exactly in 1992. Now, back then, my living room was full of newspaper clippings because, of course, that was the way I was able to collate the information that I thought I would need whenever a big news story came along. I got onto the plane on Saturday, picked up a copy of the Times, and British Airways isn't connected for any of its passengers. Some airlines, luckily for their passengers, they can browse while they're flying to their destinations. So I did the old-fashioned thing. I took the newspaper clippings, and I've got 17 pages, I think. And rather than bring the whole newspaper, and rather than show you the headline on these individual pages, let me just quickly go through it, okay, because it tells its own story. Page 17, schools block web criticism by parents. These are all the headlines. Page 20, data of up to 400,000 Britons stolen in US hack. That was the Equifax hack. Also page 20, fear of fake news convinces readers to pay for real thing. Valentinos, I know you're here somewhere. Yep, okay, your AI app, very good. Page 21, Bitcoin, question mark. That'll do nicely, say high-end stores. Page 25, 20 years on, how Google has changed everything. Page 27, try before you buy with virtual shopping apps. Page 30, in praise of the students who don't need stuff. The dad was writing about his student going to university and how he, as the dad, would take his photographs, would take his hi-fi, his records, his books, and now devices. Students don't need the stuff that we used to need when we went to university. Page 31, a cartoon of President Trump tweeting. Okay, classic. Pages 40 and 41, social media bullies are festering in their little bubble of bile and hate, a 2-page article. Page 54, Angry Birds maker takes wing with €900 million price tag. You've got everything there. You've got education, you've got personal finance, you've got social interaction, you've got business, you've got schools, you've got diplomacy. Everything is affected by the internet. Okay, I'm speaking to the converted. You know it already. So, this session, first of all, happy birthday to the Internet Society. Kathy, CEO and President, Board of Trustees, many of whom are here in the room today. Under your charge, the Internet Society has gone from strength to strength. So happy birthday to you. Let's tell you about the mechanics, the working of the report. Of all the reports that the Internet Society has published, this is undoubtedly the most far-reaching because it was for more than a year that people, thousands of people from more than 100 countries were contacted for their opinions and their analyses about what they thought was going to happen to the internet of the future and how they could affect change in that future. And it was actually these respondents who came up with the 6 things that they thought would drive the most change. It wasn't the Internet Society that made the decision, it was the respondents to the report. So I believe we can show a graphic, here we go. These are the 6 drivers of change that are going to have the most impact on the internet of the future. And they speak for themselves, and I'm sure you'll agree. The internet in the physical world is IoT, of course, AI, cyber threats, the internet economy, network standards and interoperability, and the role of governments. So the important thing is that it was the respondents who came up with these areas. No one can predict the future, but identifying the challenges ahead is a major part of coming up with answers to the questions that are posed in the challenges of the future, and positive answers. And positive answers in how they impact people, because that's at the crux, as you know, of the Internet Society. And it's its entire mission. The questions the Internet Society keeps asking is, how are people affected by the internet? What can it do for the user? And there, we come to the areas of impact, how these drivers of change impact upon people. So the areas of impact that were produced again by respondents: personal freedoms and rights, digital divides, media and society. And I would almost put here culture as well, media, culture, and society. So we're going to try to cover all 9 of these fields. You'll see how they kind of flow into each other, because every driver of change affects every area of impact. You know, is government policy increasingly curtailing our online rights? Is the IoT creating a new digital divide? So there's a lot of cross-fertilization in these topics. And I also should mention, because now when we show you our first video, for those of you watching the live stream, you may not see the pictures in the video as clearly as you'd like, but now, just as we began this session, the online report went live on the website. So you can see it all on the website. Every video we show you here today, and many more, are all included in the online report. So first, let's have an introduction to the entire report with this short video. The internet is many things to many people. It allows us to go to places we've never been, to communicate with people we've never seen. The Internet Society's 2017 Global Internet Report is a project that began more than a year ago. 2,500 people from 160 countries have had their say. They cover a range of sectors: technology, academia, internet development, business, civil society, and public policy.
This report is so important because the Internet Society is celebrating its 25th anniversary. And this is an opportunity to take our experience, to take our understanding of the Internet and think about it together with our community and think about what's coming ahead. What are the decisions that we need to make today to shape the kind of Internet that we want for the future?
Advances in technology promise plenty, but just as important as the opportunities are the challenges in maintaining a healthy, growing, stable, global internet that benefits all of us.
The internet exists and develops in the way that it does because people take care that the principles and the basic foundations of the internet are in place, that the technologies that people develop allow us to communicate across borders, allow people to express themselves freely. Technology needs to ensure that our data and our privacy is protected. So we can't take these things for granted. The world is moving quickly. The internet is more and more a part of our economies, of our political systems, of our societies. And if we care about values like openness or human rights and free expression, we cannot take those things for granted today if we want the internet of the future for tomorrow.
So that's a very general introduction, and of course the report then goes into more specifics, and in your executive summary are included the top 10 recommendations made by the Internet Society for the future internet. And you saw Sally there in that video. So let me just introduce the panel to you. And we decided that I would make the introductions because we believe these 4 people are too modest to tell their entire stories, but I'll do it as quickly as I can. So Sally Wentworth is the Vice President of Global Policy at the Internet Society. She's a former Principal Policy Advisor on Internet issues at the US State Department, also former Assistant Director for Telecoms and Information Policy in the Office of Science and Technology at the White House. Dr. Leonard Kleinrock, who you have all already met over the course of yesterday's dinner and today. He's known as one of the founding fathers of the internet, a distinguished professor just across the road at UCLA School of Engineering and Applied Science. And of course, Leonard pioneered the mathematical theory of packet networks, the technology that underpins the internet. Among the multitude of awards that you received, Leonard, and I needed to do this introduction because I knew you wouldn't mention these: the Marconi Prize, the Erickson Prize, the Alexander Graham Bell Medal, and the National Medal of Science, which is the highest science honor awarded by a President of the United States. We have Alice Munywa, founder of the Kenya ICT Action Network. It's been instrumental in working with the Kenyan government to implement ICT policy in the East African country. I almost said West African there. She convened and chaired the Kenya and East Africa Intergovernmental Forums for 5 years, and also organized and chaired the Global UN Internet Governments Forum in Nairobi 6 years ago. And of course, she's a member of the Board of Trustees of the Internet Society. And Paula Corte-Real, you've already met, one of the 25 under 25s, a graduate of the Federal University of Pernambuco in Brazil, the law school there, and here representing the 25 under 25s. The people who make up this group, of course, as you know, being celebrated at the gathering this week because they're helping shape the internet of the future and using it for good, which is exactly what Paola is doing. In the biographies, you'll see that you work with the Youth Organization Project in Brazil, amongst others, and she's a member of the Brazilian Bar Association's Commission on Information Technology Law. So these are our 4 panelists. I'll just start with a general question, then we'll show you another video. Sally, first of all, you know the report more intimately and more in detail than anybody in this room. So tell us what surprised you most about the findings of the report.
Thank you, Adnan, and first thank you to everyone for coming today. We are thrilled to be launching this report and to have worked with many of you in this room in coming up with the various drivers of change in the internet and the kinds of things that we need to do as a global internet community to create the kind of internet that we want. There's, I think, a tendency, maybe even particularly in the United States, possibly in Europe, to see all of the negative stories these days about the internet, whether it's fake news or privacy or security hacks, and all of those things certainly came up in large numbers in our research. But there was also an underlying conviction, I think, from the community that the values that brought forth the internet many, many years ago are still valid today and should still guide the development of the future internet going forward. So values of openness, this bottom-up nature of the internet, this notion that the user should be at the center of the technology really came through everything that we heard. And I think the other piece of that is a very deep concern among the community worldwide that may not be the case, that there are forces in the technology, in government action, even in industry that might change the nature of the internet and move it away from those values that are so important. So I think, in short, the values remain important, but a real worry that they may not sustain the future.
Leonard, let's pick up on those concerns that Sally's mentioned there, because at the moment the internet is this global platform for general purpose. And I'm sure, well, I know because I've read the details of the report, about AI and IoT and the people's concerns about that. Is the internet ready for this next great leap forward that everybody says is coming with these 2 particular technologies?
Whatever that great leap is, we're not sure, because the internet has always surprised us, both in the applications and the deployment of the technology. In terms of IoT, it's coming. It's going to be here. The internet will become an invisible infrastructure, happily, finally, so it's not in your face with these terrible interfaces with keyboards and apps that you have to customize. But the AI side is a rather interesting one, where deep learning is offering to take over functionality that we may not be ready to yield to. The kinds of systems that are being proposed now perform very well, but they don't tell us what they're doing. They don't provide any understanding of how they arrived at the way they operate. And if we give over functionality of great importance, be it personal or public, to systems that can't explain what they're doing, I worry. I worry a lot. Whether or not they're following the guidelines we set out for them, whether or not they're going to hit a threshold that they don't understand, where an optimized system collapses suddenly. I just worry about not knowing what these darn things are doing, even though they're doing it beautifully. So there's a certain fear there, not to address the issues that Sally mentioned, namely the attacks, the security, and all the rest, which is another concern.
Absolutely, and we will talk about all of this in more detail. Just at the moment, we're just skirting over the general issues. So, Alice, even if we could, and hopefully we will, eventually include everybody, it's about half the world, isn't it, that isn't online at the moment. But even if we could solve the connectivity problem, what are your concerns about a deepening digital divide? Because digital divides exist even within communities that are online.
Yes, and especially for developing countries that still have a long way to go, and the African continent in particular that has been left behind, where I believe that the next billion of users will be coming from. And the digital divide there is different. There are various layers for the African continent, for example, that have to do with the various dimensions of the digital divide that have to do with education, the lack of skills, the issue of income disparity, cultural issues, social cultural issues as well, that will continue to impact the way we use the internet and continue to impact the digital divide in itself. So even after with the post-access issues that are going to come up, we're still going to have to deal with the digital divide at the various levels and the various dimensions of it.
Okay, Paula, part of your work in Brazil is working with teenagers. So tell us about their next 5 to 10 years. How will they be using the internet? Will it still allow them to shape the future, or do you see them more sort of consuming content in walled gardens?
Well, just as Alice said, I think the digital divide is going to change from the word access to the word use. So there'll be a lack, there'll be a gap of ability for young people to really use the internet, because we have to create producers. They're mainly consumers. We see young people consuming information and using the internet, and they don't really see how can they use that tool for good, like to improve their lives, to change their lives, that goes beyond that, beyond their use. So we really need to empower the people for them to know how to use the internet, how to really produce, how to be creators, how to actually participate of society. So I think we're gonna go, like, we have a huge path to follow, we have a lot of things to pursue, but I think we're gonna go in a positive outcome is gonna turn out.
Okay, we're gonna be on stage for another 50 minutes, so is there a technical issue that we need to address here? Is Paula's hair go, oh, it's your medal, it's your 25 under 25 medal. Yeah, people are watching in the live stream as well, so I tell you what, maybe just put it to the side, or, you know, because we wanna be able to hear you properly. Okay, great. That's better? Okay, yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so we asked the respondents very specific questions about the drivers of change, about the areas of impact. You'll see the choicest and most pertinent cross-section of the replies in videos that are embedded in the report. But we also asked a very general question, which was, what are your hopes and fears for the future internet? And we distilled the answers into this final video that you'll also see in the online report, but let's watch it here now.
My biggest hope for the internet relates to social change. Having a society that is fully connected, with everyone having access to the internet, will get better education, better people, and at the end of the day, a better economic growth and a better society.
My fear is that internet could serve as a tool to restrict the freedom and the democracy in the societies through governmental control.
My biggest fear for the future of internet is surveillance and block and shutdown practices, because probably with the development of the Internet of Things, we may go too far and may not know where are the limits at which we should stop.
So we have many people to be connected online in the next few years. Of course, the confidence of users to use our internet services is quite important for us.
My hope for the internet, especially coming from the Africa region, is that the internet becomes an enabler of our social economic development. And more to that, I would like to see and be able to contribute to ensuring that we are connecting African citizens so that they're able to use the internet to enable their own, not just social economic development, but also political and cultural expression.
My biggest fear is the growing power of very few corporations are taking in the internet ecosystem.
My biggest fear is that the gap between countries, between the rich and the poor, will increase. The gap between those who are connected and those who are not connected will increase. The gap between incomes of those who are connected versus those who are not connected will increase. The gap between those who are educated and prepared for the digital era will increase with those who are left behind.
I can't really read into the crystal ball and tell you the internet will only be positive. But everything humans have introduced over the last 2,000, 15, 20,000 years, in the end, it has always benefited the social and societal evolution.
I think we should include the youth into every process so that the youth can understand the whole ecosystem of internet and see unlimited opportunities, and also feel the responsibility to protect the general principles of the internet so that the internet can thrive.
As many people get online, as we have many people using gadgets and going online, there's a lot of fear in terms of security and privacy. Many people do not think about it, especially in rural areas where we see many people starting to use the internet. They're very excited about the internet, but they do not know about the fears that the internet also brings.
I'm sure there have been a lot of you nodding, because that is really just the perfect cross-section of both hopes and fears for the future internet. And Sally, you talked about people's concerns. Quite a few of them were expressed there. The concerns that people's online freedoms, their online rights are going to be negatively affected in the internet of the future, the possibility that IoT and AI could lead to increasing surveillance, the increasing prevalence and sophisticated nature of cyber attacks. There are so many interested parties. You know as well as I do, it's government, it's private corporations, it's organizations like the internet, it's users. So many people have an interest in the decision making. How do you make sure, or how can it possibly be that all these different interests could find a common solution?
Well, I think we draw inspiration from how the internet itself was developed, and it is continuing to be developed. There is a tremendous amount of effort by technical, commercial, government, civil society people developing the internet at a technical level, and also the policies around it every day. And so I think we have to drive some inspiration from that model and from that approach. It is certainly our view, and I think the experience of the internet brings this out, that the more you can bring expertise and stakeholders around the table to solve hard problems, the more robust and sustainable the solutions will be. When we try to close the door and we try to make decisions in a closed group, we may come up with outcomes that benefit a few people but can't be technically implemented, or harm free speech, or have all of these other effects that might have been curtailed had more of these stakeholders been part of the process. And I think as the challenges become more and more profound, the need to do that will become ever stronger.
It may be, and you may disagree, that the one party with the most power to affect how the internet is used, when it's used, is government. And Alice, you have experience of working with the Kenyan government. And coming from Africa, we were just talking yesterday about how Togo was the last country just very recently to experience an internet shutdown. Then there was Cameroon, and there are so many other examples around the world. And people are worried about internet shutdowns by their government. How can one influence a government to desist from actions that affect users' rights? Donald Trump, right? After the London attack, he was talking about how the internet is the main source of recruitment for terror groups. And then before the election, he said, I want to talk to Bill Gates about shutting down the internet. Now, that's just one example.
Yeah, I've worked with the Kenyan government for nearly 8 years, and then with African government through the African Union Commission, and I can tell you that not all governments think like that. There are some that are extremely progressive, for example, the Kenyan one. And I must state this from the beginning, that, for example, for the Africa region, the government plays a critical role in enabling robust and use and access to the internet. A good example is the Kenyan example. We don't have such a strong private sector, and so the Kenyan government goes ahead and invests in infrastructure. And not just the Kenyan government, but several others, the South African government and others, so they play a really critical role. So for the Africa region, you really cannot do without government, no matter what we pretend to be. So they're a very important stakeholder. And at the same time, what I think we need to do is to ensure that when we are dealing with governments, they have the capacity or the understanding of the role that the internet plays, socially, economically, political expression, and in enabling the Sustainable Development Goals to be implemented. And so coming from that perspective, then governments would probably understand that the role of the internet is extremely critical in enabling a digital economy, and so would be more hesitant in taking an approach of shutting down the internet at whatever level. And several of them actually are very insistent on ensuring that they're providing an enabling environment to ensure that they're moving towards a digital economy and ensuring that the digital divide is actually taken care of. So again, I mean, not all governments look at it from that perspective.
And in fact, when we were talking yesterday in preparation for this session, you said to me when security services say, talk to governments and they say, don't shut the internet down because we're using it. It's important for us, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also some governments actually take into consideration the importance of involving other stakeholders. They do understand that governments cannot go alone when it comes to ICTs for development, and so work with other stakeholders, the private sector, the civil society, including youth, to ensure that they're providing that enabling environment and providing that foundation for all the various stakeholders and sectors to work together to ensure that the internet remains open. Now, you can look at Togo and Cameroon as the examples where internet shutdown took place, but that's mostly politically motivated, and you have to understand that most governments will always act from a political perspective. They have the public, so their motivation is political. So if we're able to speak to them from that perspective, in that, okay, you have to enable, these are your constituencies, so for you to enable that political expression, you're actually shutting down people who support your government, your current government, and also who support the use of ICTs to enable the development blueprint to be implemented. So, and yeah, again, back to law enforcement agencies, sometimes they're the ones that actually contribute to not really forcing, but encouraging governments to shut down. There's always the cybersecurity issue that is brought up. What we found with many governments from developing countries or underserved regions is once they understand the role of the internet, even in cybersecurity issues, they're more hesitant. And in fact, some of them go out of their way. For example, the Kenyan government in adapting the multi-stakeholder model to ensure that they're working with all the other stakeholders to ensure that there's an enabling environment for the internet.
Leonard, does this tie in at all with the architectural issues that we were talking about yesterday in terms of how governments treat or react to the internet?
Yes, I think some of the concern is that as these countries do close down, put boundaries around their governmental internets, we get a balkanization of the internet. And we'll see little bits and pieces separated out from the larger, if you will, open, free internet. And as they pull out, we all lose. They no longer have access. We don't have access to their contributions. And if we go to a balkanized mode, which is where networks almost went before the internet came in, we had these private networks, we had these proprietary networks with no intercommunication. Happily, that didn't happen. The internet bubbled up from beneath, organically grew, and the voice of the people, if you will, and of the community enabled this common, open, shared internet. As we see balkanization come, I fear and worry that will have a disastrous effect on the impact and the value of what we now call the internet. Now, there are ways to try to protect against that. That's perhaps another discussion.
No, that's absolutely for now, because I was going to ask that Sally, but you've started it, so carry on.
Well, are we in a fight?
Yeah.
So one of the big concerns is security, cybersecurity and surveillance and all the rest. So one answer is encryption. And encryption is a partial solution. But in terms of changing the architecture of the internet to enable more protection against the dark side of the internet, which has now bubbled up right in our face, offers some technical and architectural solutions. I think there are some major architectural changes which need to take place in the internet. And I'd like to see more effort put forward to new, innovative architectural changes. For example, as we discussed yesterday, there's this notion, this far-out notion of what's called homomorphic encryption, if you'd pardon the expression. It basically says that we can encrypt our data, encrypt our programs, and have those encrypted programs process the encrypted data without ever decrypting the data, so no one can read it while it's being processed. Now that's a far-off idea. It's being researched. There are some potential breakthroughs coming through. But even if we get there and we protect the internet, the trouble is on a topic you mentioned a moment ago, the edge, where the Internet of Things is just moving ahead in a boundless fashion. This unprotected edge, where the users and the devices, those devices put together by a small company, thrown in your wall, with a camera, with a microphone, with access to the internet, in a typically unprotected, insecure fashion. That's where the penetrations will take place. So even if we get this architectural change in the internet, we'll still have that problem, and that's not being addressed properly at all. We talked about IoT being a concern. Yes, it is. Well, what body, what organization is going to say that small company X putting out this device in my wall, you'd better have this kind of protection built in or you can't install it? That's a little heavy-handed. So we're facing that kind of technical, social, political issue here.
Sally, anything to say about how to prevent governments from balkanizing the internet, from it becoming fragmented? Because as individuals, users don't have that power, surely.
Well, I think this was a concern that came through loud and clear, that this is, people fear this is the direction we're going. And yes, there's a potential for government action to lead us down that road, and particularly under the guise of security, but sometimes under the guise of economic protection, wanting to protect particular industries, wanting to protect their markets from globalization. And we see that happening more and more, I think, in the last year, 18 months. And that's, I think, something that I think governments feel under enormous pressure to do something. There are these cyber threats out there. Cybersecurity feels daunting to the average user. We read about attacks, data breaches, all the rest, and governments feel like they need to do something. And in the absence of progress or things that they can latch onto in terms of technology, I think the policy solutions will start to be increasingly heavy-handed. Yeah. I think the other thing we have to focus on as well, though, is this notion of commercial fragmentation. Are we going to see a move into the quote-unquote walled gardens through a commercial lens where and this is also something we saw in the IoT discussion as well. Are people going to be locked into device worlds or types of devices and objects that lock them into a particular environment that doesn't communicate outside? But then finally, to Len's point, I mean, the issues of IoT security are obviously profound. They increase the threat landscape enormously. The amount of data being generated, the amount of data being analyzed, and the amount of data about all of us personally that is now available to be used, to be looked at with or without our consent, with or without our knowledge. And I think many people that we spoke to in this report feel like it's kind of the wild, wild west out there right now, and that there's a real need to act urgently in that regard if we're going to deal with these other cyber threats.
Okay, Paula, tell us about your experience. We're going to move it on now to your experience with the teenagers in Brazil, because again, in the report, people spoke about their concerns that internet technology, artificial intelligence can promote an echo chamber, filtering news to you that only fits your viewpoint of the world. And then, of course, there's the fake news. As a journalist, I just can't trust what I see anymore. On my Twitter timeline or wherever it is, I have to cross-reference it twice, minimum twice, to believe. One of my very good friends who's a journalist in Turkey, he's a British guy, he retweeted something that he thought was from Donald Trump. And the thing that fooled him was the Twitter account that it was posted from was @RealDonaldTumper, not Trump. And I messaged him on WhatsApp. I said, you have to take that down, it's fake. But okay, tell us about whether you see the internet affecting these teenagers' view of the world.
Well, first of all, you talk about echo chambers. This is really related with the filter bubble that we live in, especially when people use like social networks as their primary source for information. So that's pretty much a concern because their view are strictly closed. I mean, they just view the things, they're thrown information and they absorb it and they don't really think like critical. They don't have this criticism with the things they read. So about fake news, I was talking to Valentinos as well.
Yes.
He is a great example of using technology to fight against fake news, because he's using AI to identify fake news as fact-checking. But when I was talking to him, we came to the same conclusion that I said, that people have to be more critical with what they read, with what they share, because they don't check sources, they just keep sharing, and internet has the power to make it faster and easier to share things that are not right. I mean, like fake news, they are not real. So I think it's basically that. We have to fight it, and we have the technology to fight it. The same technology that enables this harm can be the tool to fight against it.
And what work are you doing that other people can use as an example in terms of stopping the spread of hate or of opinions that downgrade other people? And you know, I'm kind of asking you this because in Brazil it seems to be a very divided society at the moment because of the political situation. I mean, people are rioting in the streets and that affects everybody. And I'm just wondering if there's something that you're doing that other people can use as an example to stop or curtail the spread of hate.
Well, we have a pretty special situation in Brazil right now because of the political scenario. And people use social network to spread hate. And when they are behind a keyboard, they're more likely to say things that they wouldn't if they were face to face. But as you asked for an example of things that I'm doing, the project that I'm doing, led by the commission that you mentioned, we go to public schools and try to deliver information for the youth, for them to know how they can use the internet for good, how the things that they post online, the content that they share can affect other people. So basically, I think how can we address that is by education, by people learning how to put human rights that are offline as online as well. So I think it's this way.
Okay. By the way, you'll get a chance to put your questions to the panel at the end, so prepare yourselves for that. Leonard, you already talked about a little bit about artificial intelligence, and I asked permission to ask this question. Okay, and you agreed, and our Internet Society said I can ask this question. At the start of this month, Vladimir Putin was speaking to some Russian students, and he said, let me get the quote right, "Artificial intelligence is the future, not only for Russia, but for all humankind. It comes with colossal opportunities, but also threats that are difficult to predict. Whoever becomes the leader in this sphere will become the ruler of the world." That's all he said. And everybody who saw that quote was wondering, what are you talking about? Leonard, can you read between the lines of that?
My name is not Trump. I don't know Putin. But you can suggest that it's a threat, as politicians of his nature make all the time, and try to allow it to bubble out there and let other people interpret it and enlarge it. The question of whether or not it can be weaponized is interesting, because if you go back to where the trouble began in the late 80s, early 90s, when the dark side of the internet began to emerge, just as we saw the popularization. What is it that gives the power to the internet? And this will answer the question with Putin in just a moment. It's the ability to allow anybody with any device to connect at any time to millions of people, billions of people, at no cost in energy, effort, or money, instantly and anonymously. That's a perfect formula for the dark side of the internet as it bubbled up. And there somehow it characterizes the battling forces we have, the openness, the freedom, the dark side, and the dangers. And if you crunch this, you may crunch this, but do you want to? You know, so how do you balance that? We see that in all of these discussions. That tension of openness on the one hand and the flexibility and the rigidity you impose if you try to turn it down. Now, in those days of the early dark side of the internet, it was a nuisance. You know, the internet, I used to say, it's in its teenage years, it's behaving badly, unpredictably, and it's disobedient. But it's changed now. Now we have nation states, we have organized crime, we have political ambitions making very serious threats, the kind you heard Putin say just the other day. Much more serious. The actions we take can very much affect how that discussion takes place. But when Putin says AI will control things, he's basically repeating the kind of thing I mentioned before. We can launch these things with enormous power and step back. And I didn't do it, it did. It being the AI, the intelligence that's out there. So yes, there's great danger there. And it harkens back to what I said. If we don't have some understanding as to what we're unleashing, and in general we don't, there'll be consequences. And I don't have a solution. The only thing I can respond is that the internet has continuously surprised us, not so much with the technology. We see the technology path very clearly. With the applications, the uses, the abuses, if you will. We've been surprised every time from the beginning of email to cyber attacks, to the Facebook, to the Instagrams, to email, to YouTube, and all the rest. Nobody saw that coming. Well, what's coming next? It's that 25 under 25 group that's going to predict it. Great opportunities, great responsibility, an open field. So to try to predict where it's going to go and how these powerful tools we're enabling and unleashing will move is awfully hard. So the answer to you is, I don't know.
Sure, absolutely. That's why everybody wanted him to expand on that. Maybe we're scared of the answer. Sally, are you nodding because you want to say something about this?
Well, I think just to build on that, this notion of how artificial intelligence will unfold came up, again, quite a bit in the report. One of the Internet Hall of Fame individuals, and I won't get the quote exactly right, he says, you have all of these hosts of decisions that are being made by entities I can't see, outcomes that are supposedly for my benefit, and I have no idea what's going on. And that's positively terrifying. I think that was his quote. And that, you know, those kinds of decisions are going to start affecting every aspect of our lives. And I think to the point that you were making, a number of the researchers and really advanced thinkers in the AI space have come together with a declaration saying there must be ethical considerations at the heart of the design and the deployment of artificial intelligence. And I think that's something that we grabbed onto very strongly in this report, that there's a sense that technology can move so much farther ahead of humanity's ability to manage it, to use it in ways that are good for society and fulfill the visions that the earlier founders had. And so I think that's something that came through very, very strongly, this notion of ethical design, this notion of humanity being in the driver's seat, because the implications really are profound. They could be frightening. They could also be incredible for humankind.
Yes, absolutely. And one respondent who told us that it's imperative that the biases of the human that programs the artificial intelligence application is not transmitted to that application itself. That's going to be absolutely critical as well. Alice, is IoT and artificial intelligence only going to increase the digital divide that exists between the developed and the developing world? There must be great fears of that, I presume.
Yes, I believe so. And I think all indications point to that, really. If we haven't been able to deal with the current digital divide, with the state of the current internet as it is, then how are we going to deal with it with AI and IoT? And especially taking into consideration that we still don't have the infrastructure in place. We still don't have universal affordable access in place. And as they've mentioned, technology is moving so fast that most of us are not able to even keep in touch with the current developments in terms of addressing the current digital divide. So it'll definitely increase it and widen it.
And yet the irony is that you could argue that actually the Internet of Things will benefit the developing world more than anybody else. Something like 95% of the world's water is used in agriculture. There are IoT devices that are now telling the farmer where to put the water because that's where the land is going to produce the best results. So the decision making, is it already in place by governments that you've worked with or that you know of that are going to embrace IoT as soon as it becomes affordable to them? Or are they thinking, you know what, we've got more pressing human needs. We've got education needs, we've got housing needs, we've got healthcare needs.
And that's probably where we should be focusing, because I'll give you an example what we did in Kenya that may be able to point to how we're working with this. For example, the Kenyan government was very progressive during the last one, and went ahead and launched the open data project, and it was really the first in Africa. But what we had not foreseen, because I was a member of the government then, it was like, I'll use this analogy, building a library, but nobody can read. So what we hadn't done is provided all the foundation, the skills, education to use this library, but we provided it and nobody could use it. And so we have to take 10 steps back and start addressing the current challenges, which are usually really to do with the various dimensions that contribute to the digital divide, which are the lack of skills, the lack of level of education to enable people to use those facilities effectively and meaningfully that will impact on their lives. So that you can see how then that works. We have to deal with the issues that are important: education, providing education, the necessary skills, enabling environment, before we can then ensure that we have more people able to access, and that IoT and AI are providing a positive impact.
Okay, a few more minutes with the panelists and then you get your opportunity. Gonzalo, are you here? Yeah, okay. Do you recognize this quote? I'm going to quote Gonzalo to you, word for word from your interview that you did for us. Leonard, this is for you. Okay, this is what Gonzalo told us. The biggest technical issue that relates to standards at this point is that it's a winner-take-all market. I think the standardization process that we have right now, they scale up to a multi-stakeholder setting, but the internet at the same time removes frictions for markets. And then the winner of the market can have a monopoly or basically capture a very big amount of the market. We have to make sure that a winner-takes-all market doesn't become a real problem on the internet. Is there any way to avoid such a winner-take-all scenario?
That's a tough one. Thank you, Gonzalo. We've seen plenty of winner-take-all models already in our environment, in the large companies coming in. And that's an impact whereby the immediate communication, the immediate brand recognition, or familiarity with an app catches on and penetrates to the society. This actually touches upon net neutrality, even though you didn't ask that question.
Yeah, that's in my general points, yeah.
Well, if we allow organizations to exert their power and crush competition through their power, through their winner position at the moment, that will just perpetuate the fear that you expressed. The whole notion of the innovator's dilemma, if you're familiar with that, where these new companies come along and challenge an established entity, be it an IBM or whatever, by taking advantage of the low margin side of their market, so they don't care. But as they move up the food chain, they have a lot of acceleration and a lot of capability and a lot of efficiency, and these larger corporations can't maneuver quickly enough to compete against that thrust. That innovator's dilemma, if you will, a wonderful book by Clay Christensen, has enormous power to try to break up some of those winner-take-all situations. But if they're suppressed and they can't express and expose and deploy what they have, and they can be crushed by the powers before they get moving, that will just perpetuate this problem.
So who makes sure that they don't get crushed?
Well, if you give the power to an organization to give preference to the winners in the use of their technology, preferential pricing, preferential treatment, preferential access. It's those large organizations, it's not the ones that are dominating, but the ones that are supporting them in the way they reach the public, the way they deploy, the way they move around. That's where you have the leverage. But it's a political issue, it's a social issue, and it's a technical issue. Not an easy problem, but I do fear that trend, we've seen it, that trend is here. I mean, what's the diversity in the major applications we see? It's very small, and we don't see them bubbling up.
Okay, actually, you've reminded me that you mentioned something that you wanted to have discussed, so let's throw it open to the other three and then you come in on it. You said that you believe that there's too much responsibility in terms of privacy issues and security issues, too much responsibility placed on the internet user. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure we all agree about that because, of course, you said, you get a 25-page document and, everybody goes down to the bottom and they just tick the box. So what can be done about that? Anybody want to pick up on that? Paola, Alice, or Sally? It's open to any of you, and then we'll have Leonard come in to answer his own question.
Well, I think it's a burden to the user. You're putting too much responsibility on them. And I think the responsibility should be shared by internet platforms, for an example. We have terms of use that are huge that people are not able to comprehend or even to read it. So I think that responsibility should be shared, and that issue should be addressed throughout teaching users how can they protect themselves while they're online. When I had the opportunity to go to public schools again with my project, we always tackle those issues about privacy, about security, about how can they access some content and see if it's trustworthy or not. So I think we should empower the user more than put responsibility on them. So every stakeholder should work on that, to address this problem. I think it's not about the user itself.
Leonard, if we as users of a certain company's device can't persuade that company to put back the little hole in which we put our earphones, because that company doesn't want us to use that little socket anymore, how can we make companies take more responsibility for issues that they say, look, you're the user, you've got to take your own responsibility?
Well, that touches on one of the points I think you were addressing, is how much responsibility should we put on the users? How sophisticated should a user have to be to understand and carefully use the technology that's being presented? I think putting the burden on the user to become a sophisticated security expert, an adept at maneuvering privacy and rights issues is the wrong way to do it. It should be far simpler. And I think one of the things we could do is to allow the user to express what privacy policy, security policy they'd like applied to them. This is what I'm willing to accept or not. Here it is. And then the industry with those 25 pages, ridiculous, they should be able to present what is their policy on privacy and security in an easily understandable representation. Text is the wrong way to do it. 25 pages, forget about it. Graphically, there are ways they can express how much effort they put in attacking a certain aspect of your privacy, less on this, more on this. There are diagrams that will represent it immediately. We're great at pattern recognition. Say, oh, that sort of matches what I want. Now, typically what I'd express will not match what's being presented. But at least it's a start. At least we know. And then I can choose, no, I don't like this representation. That vendor has something more adaptable to what I like. And it'll allow a simple representation by the user to be read against a simple representation by the vendor. But will we get that? I don't know.
Okay, so I'm opening the floor to you. Alessandro's waving the microphone. Before we get the first question from the floor, Sally, let's finish this little bit where we started. What does the report tell us about ISOC's mission, the Internet Society's mission going forward? Are we properly prepared for what we believe is coming?
Well, I think just going back to the first comment I made, I think what we learned from this report is that the values that the Internet was founded on, and therefore the values of the Internet Society, remain valid going into the future. So the need for an open internet, the need for a user-centric internet that protects people's privacy, that empowers them, not disempowers them. The need to promote an environment where innovation can continue to unfold. These are all things that remain valid. They are not Western, they are not tied to one country, one geography. They are values that are universal that can propel us into the future. But I think what we learned as well is that those values are under threat and they are being challenged. And so for the Internet Society, I think what the report tells us is there are new challenges on the horizon that we need to be prepared for, that we as a community need to take seriously, that we need to look forward and not look into the past, and really take heart in those values, but push them very hard out into the world.
Okay, thank you. So now it's your turn. So please raise your hand. Alessandro's there with the microphone. Okay. Oh, Walid, I was hoping you'd ask a question. And if you weren't going to ask when I was going to make you ask one. Thank you. Just say who you are and then ask your question, please.
Okay, I'm Valentinos Zegas, founder of Fight House. I'm one of the awardees. And I want to ask the panel, what do you think is the best solution that we can apply right now, today, to cure the whole misinformation problem on the internet? Do we need to provide the everyday normal citizens, people with the right tools? Should we start from the bottom to top, the other way, or at the same thing together?
That is such a difficult question to answer. My God,
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not part of the panel. Is there anybody? Leonard?
I'm going to answer something which you'll enjoy especially. I think we have to support and expand the talent of investigative reporting, journalism, which is being crushed right now. To delve into a situation that's threatening and expose the truth without fear of retribution. And our reporting profession has been doing that in the past, and it's disappearing. It's not being funded, it's being compromised. People are moving into more comfortable positions. And I appeal to your profession to somehow get money from the public to support you.
Okay, well, I can tell you that the problem is that we, all of us, who are skeptical of the news that we hear and read and listen to, are fighting against nation states. Nation states have now taken it upon themselves to bombard us with misinformation so that our natural reaction is to just not know what's real or not. So it's a huge problem. I can't answer your question because it's so utterly difficult to answer it. I agree that that's one part of the way we can tackle the problem. But technology, like yours, is going to become essential in fighting that, I think, because our brains can't immediately, because we don't know the eternal truths of real life and the situation on the other side of the world. So it'll have to be technology that cross-references for us, because we can't spend 24 hours a day verifying everything we read, listen to, and see on the TV. Anybody else? Leonard.
Well, you know, Wikipedia is an interesting example where the public somehow collects information, criticizes each other, and more or less gets the truth. So where are we applying the group capability, the crowd intelligence, to try to attack something? Of course, if we get into the modes where it's the bubble effect, that's not what you want. But how do we break the bubble and still get the collective wisdom, if you will, to speak forward? That's one way to do it, but it's not sure that's going to work. It did pretty much work in Wikipedia.
I was lying in bed with my wife a few years ago, looking at my Wikipedia page. Okay. It's a decent story. Okay. And I said to her, hey, look, I'm having an affair with one of my co-presenters. She said, oh, really, are you? Anybody can edit a Wikipedia page. Yes. Waleed?
First of all, let me say it's music to my ears to hear that investigative journalism needs to be boosted, because I have the two legs. One leg is in media and the other in technology, so I feel strongly about this. But I'd like to point out that there's a technology that I'd like us to discuss more, and it's called blockchain technology. You've realized how it's grown recently, and one area that I like about it is immutability, the lack of, let's say, the inability to defraud data when it's stored there. So what do you think the future holds with blockchain technology, both in terms of data protection, privacy, censorship, circumvention, or let's say immunity to censorship, and other aspects, particularly that it's driving now the e-commerce in some parts of the world, not necessarily in everywhere, but it's beginning to create a disruptive reality on top of the internet. So where do you see the future heading in that sense? Thank you.
Leonard, that's got to be for you, because the article I see most commonly published as far as blockchain is concerned is simply blockchain explained. A lot of people are struggling to understand exactly what blockchain is, but evangelicals like Waleed, and I've met a few, they say it's absolutely the future and it will resolve almost every problem that is presented to people who are looking to solve the world's problems.
You've just given it the best discretization that you could.
Yes.
However, I agree blockchain has an enormous potential. The immutability is very important. And it also has the crowd mentality, redundancy, robustness. One indication that it has potential to really succeed is the fact that the criminal element and the anonymous element has been pushing it. Most good technologies begin with pornography or criminal actions. So there's a good indicator there. But I agree, blockchain, but trouble is it's full of puff and deception at this point. Things are coming out there which are failing, but there's been enough of a what should I say, thrust in this field. People are willing to accept this concept of cryptocurrency with no immediate value, and suddenly it has value. And then the value follows. In fact, it actually does have real value. So I think there's enormous potential there. The ability to get around the middleman that sucks the juice out of a transaction is one of its strong powers. The particular mining technologies may have to change. Some of them are very cumbersome, are very costly. There are approaches, you probably know, where there's simpler ways to keep the records and the ledgers correct. So I'm very optimistic about it, although it has yet to be accepted by the public as, what shall I say, legitimate.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes, yep. Right, all this side of the room. Yeah.
Hey, hello everyone. I am Aka from Cameroon, a 2525 as well. So my question is going to revolve around the digital divide, or the gap between those who are learned or unlearned and those who already have quite sound knowledge of the evolving digital world. So in some parts of Africa, I watched a video about saw a class in Kenya, I'm sure, about how they were trying to teach little kids on the invention of the computer, and they actually brought a computer at the front desk. So while going through all the students, each of them had to understand the different parts of the computer on the table. And they arrived one little child. She was like afraid to even go close to any of those parts. She literally screamed the entire campus. Really scared, like there was some monster in front of her. So that kind of literacy level is really difficult to actually overcome. So I want to know the different techniques the Internet Society as a pioneer or a spearheading organization is doing towards these types of communities. Well, it didn't happen to me because I think I was really conscious. And like I shared my story yesterday, my first computer at 11, which is pretty much a young age for people of Cameroon to actually get a PC. I didn't have much of a trouble because I was passionate and excited, always going towards it. But there's, again, these types of people who really are seeing these computers as monsters, and that's going to create a huge digital divide, given that the advancement of technology is really exponential and their education is barely arithmetical. So these different rates of progression of these two fields is a problem. So let the Internet Society try to see more on how these types of people can be waken up to technology.
Okay, Sally, that's one for you and one for your member of the Board of Trustees. Who wants to go first?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I think you touch on something that I know we feel very strongly about at the Internet Society, which is that the Internet should be for everyone, and that the need to overcome the digital divide itself is paramount. It must be the priority. What we found in this report is this sense, and I think it's reflected in your comments, that the digital divide itself is evolving, which should be a surprise. As the technology becomes more widely available, we still have gaps in access between those who have access and those who do not. But then there's these other kinds of divides that are starting to emerge between individuals who may have access, but as you said, don't have the skills to leverage that access. People who have access but don't have the economic opportunities in their societies to do anything with that access. And then the other piece that we started to see was this notion of a security divide emerging, of people who have either the resources or the skills to protect themselves online versus those who do not. And those divides can be within countries, developed or developing, and all of these are going to be more profound and I think tied to broader economic development challenges going forward, because you won't be able to just say the internet is over here and then there's the rest of the economy. It all links together. You asked the question about what is the Internet Society doing about this, and I would say, first of all, it is part and core to our mission at the Internet Society to connect the unconnected, to be part of the solution. And we do that in any number of ways, whether it is through promoting connectivity itself, to the policies that need to be in place to allow connectivity to happen, to make it affordable, and then also on the skills that are needed to do the things that you yourself have done. Can we spread that more broadly across the world? The answer is the Internet Society itself can't do it on our own, but people like you, I was really impressed this morning to hear how many of the 25 under 25 projects are about addressing the gaps in education or in skills or in language or in content, because those are the things that are closest to home for you. And the thing at the Internet Society I think that we can do is to support what you're doing, because you know what that is on the ground that's needed. So Alice, I guess I can turn to you if you want to add anything, but that's at least a partial answer to your question.
Yeah, I think, Sally, you've covered everything. I think the only thing I would add and emphasize is the Internet Society does acknowledge that it can, we cannot do everything ourselves, and partners with the various stakeholders at the various levels to address those gaps.
Yeah, and actually what we can add is for people watching the live stream is that you can be an everyday internet hero as well. This is the campaign, #ShapeTomorrow. You can be a part of the internet's future and you can play a role. Many of you here today, in fact, probably all of you, are playing an important role for the future internet. And if you want to go to www.internetsociety.org/shapetomorrow, if you're watching the live stream, you can get involved as well, and you can be part of helping people to become more educated in terms of how to use the internet for good. Okay, shall we have one more question? Sorry, two more questions. Okay, okay. Right. Okay, Linda Patino.
Yeah, I'm Linda Patino, one of the 25 under 25. Hello again. My question is about This morning I was telling the people who interviewed us that one of my biggest fears is about artificial intelligence. And this is the topic because artificial intelligence is one of the most powerful technologies to solve biggest problems in humanity, but it develops so quickly that it can destroy a lot of things. I'm worried about the people because, I don't know, I guess 3 weeks ago, the presidents of the World Bank just said that artificial intelligence will replace approximately 60% of the jobs in developing countries. This is a lot of people, and a lot of people who's not ready to train themselves in new abilities to manage technology. This is people who is working the whole life in the same factory, and then suddenly it's being replaced. I'm scared of them, but I'm also interested on knowing what Isaac is doing on artificial intelligence. How can we help? And if there's any focus group talking about this, because I will gladly be part of it, because it's a huge challenge for the next 25 years ahead.
Okay, thank you. Another one for you, Sally.
Another one for me. Thank you for that. I think you've touched on something that we heard over and over, and many of us feel very profoundly, this fear, this concern about whether this technology is going to make our lives better or whether it's going to literally pull the rug out from under people. And I think the sense that we got was we're not, maybe as a society, we're not ready for this. We are facing what people have described as the next industrial revolution that's going to happen very quickly. And it is imperative, I think, that societies around the world start focusing on this today. There is skills development, education systems have to be thinking about this now. We all have to look at this for our children and for individuals in the market today. And I don't think there's an easy solution. I would be delighted if you wanted to start a group within the Internet Society to think and talk about these issues. There are ways to do that. This is something that I think is now increasingly on our radar screen as one of the implications we all have to collectively think about. And what we're seeing, I think, in the policy space for sure is a sense that governments see this coming. Some of them do. They don't know what to do. And there is this tendency when they don't know what to do to try to put on the brakes and say, you know what, we don't know what to do. We need to stop this. We need to put rules in place to slow down the technology. And that rarely works. So I think we need to find a different way forward. I don't think there's an easy answer, but it's, I think, a crucial question.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, final one. Alessandra, sorry, guys.
Okay, so one of the topics that I'm deeply involved in is what's called brain-friendly learning and neuroplasticity. And one of the topics that I did not hear come up, and maybe I missed it, was what's happening to us as we're trying to read something or learn something or watch something, and we're constantly being bombarded with ads and things that want to pull us away from what we're trying to focus on. So I found back in the old day, companies spent a lot of money on what they called user experience and the interface to make it as comfortable and as enjoyable as possible to be on the internet and find things and use things. And it's almost like the opposite now. There's so many distractions. It's really annoying, and you just want to read something and learn something, yet you're being pulled away. So it's actually affecting our brains. Right? So one of the taglines is shape tomorrow. Well, this is part of shaping tomorrow. We're shaping ourselves physically and the way we learn. And the young people that grow up, start reading at 8 years old, and this is always happening to them. What are we physically doing to ourselves that's preventing us from learning the way we can? So I know it's a big question at the end of the day.
That is a big question.
I'd love to hear, any input.
Sounds as if it requires scientific research, actually, and that wasn't one of the, in any way, any of the topics that the report covered. I don't know. You want to say something about that?
I think you raise a point that I would expect people would
nod up and down and say yes. You know, when you're bombarded with email at the time you're trying to read an article and you're an instant chat, it's hard to focus. And I know even the work that I do, I actually put "I'm focusing" in my status so people will leave me alone sometimes. But it's getting harder and harder. I think the thing that did come through that I heard a number of times in the interviews was in the discussion about how does this impact society? How does this impact the ability of people to sit down and have a conversation? Can I just have a conversation with you? Or am I competing with you for your attention? And as you say, it's got to affect the physical part of us as much as our social interactions. And so all of those things go certainly hand in hand. Was it brought up directly? I can't say that it was, but I think that the implications of what you're talking about came through in many of the discussions we had.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, you know here at the Luskin Conference Center, you all have your own timetables of all the events that are happening. It's action-packed every day. But for people who are watching online, the inter-community conversations are going to continue over the next 24 hours, and they'll eventually conclude back here in LA. But the next streaming service is GMT UTC, midnight 30. In other words, about 5 hours from now, which will be the Internet Hall of Fame induction ceremony. And this is fantastic, okay? I didn't source this, and I used Evelyn Namara as my source, okay? So this is on you, Evelyn. The inter-community regional nodes that are going to be having some sort of event to discuss the issues of the Global Internet Report are 70. I could only find about 12. You said 70, so I'll believe you. But, okay, listen. The inter-community conversations begin in Tokyo at 0200 GMT. Then Brisbane, Singapore, Delhi, Flic-en-Flac in Mauritius, Johannesburg, Cairo, Beirut, Istanbul, Geneva, Lisbon, Dakar, Senegal, rather than Dhaka, Bangladesh, Montevideo, Guadalajara, New York, and then back here in Los Angeles at 1700 UTC, but in Panama, in Pakistan, in other parts of the world, in Yemen as well, they're going to be holding some kind of event that is going to look at the results and discuss the Global Internet Report. But from us, thank you very much, Sally, Leonard, Alice, and Paola, and thank you to you, and thanks for watching. Thanks, Paola. Thanks a lot.